Check 1 2, check 1 2. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, everybody, if you can hear me okay. My name is Dustin Cormier, and this is another episode of How to Rock Astrology. It's a pleasure to see you all. Today we are going to be discussing Dhanishta, the nakshatra Dhanishta. Let's see, I think I got a picture of it on here somewhere. As Dhanishta is the current section of the 27 nakshatras that we have got to. Dhanishta is among the, what I would call the latter parts of the 27 nakshatra wheel. It's among the last 9. And it is a very special and important nakshatra, as they all are. We could really say that about all of them. There's in fact no nakshatras that are more important than another. But this is a nakshatra that I love because it relates to the Vasus. And the Vasus are the elements that make up many of the gods. So it's an important, well, again, they're all important, so I guess I gotta stop saying that. I digress. So it's nice to see you all. It's nice to be here live with you guys. Haven't been live for a little bit. Now, as always with our Nakshatra Sutra discussion, I like to begin by talking a little bit about what the series is about, and as we move along, we're going to eventually describe the character of Dhanishta. And at the end of this, we're going to also describe what is the character of a person who is a Dhanishta native, which is typically described by someone who has the moon in the nakshatra of Dhanishta, or who also has the lagna there. That's the rising sign point, the actual cusp of the first house, as well as having lots of planets there. What can we expect from Dhanishta? So this is live. Feel free to hang out and feel free to make any questions, make any comments, and I'll do my best to answer them as we can. And whenever I do any of these, I always have a presentation that I like to present. And this is just based on pictures that I've picked up and sort of collected for each nakshatra as I've come along in time. So that is right, ladies and gentlemen. We are beginning today with Dhanishta. Hopefully this is the right thing here. I'm just going to make sure I'm all cleaned up on my screen. Yes. And thank you all for being here. So let's move through. This is Dhanishta Nakshatra. Now, for all those who are interested, this is my introduction to my 27 Nakshatra series. If you want to hear a little bit more about this, I've got more videos describing it. You can go into my YouTube channel and find my Dhanishta, find my Nakshatra playlist. And you'll see a few introductory videos describing this series. In my practice, I use 12 tropical rashis, or signs, overlaid on the 27 nakshatras. So these two wheels spin against each other over a period of 24,000 years, approximately, due to the precession of the equinox. Excuse me. Got the sneezies. And if you're interested in the topic of how the tropical signs revolve around the sidereal signs, you can check out my video, The Age of Aquarius Debunked, as well as my sidereal versus tropical videos where I describe a little bit more about that. Now, I just want to make sure, all right, so I'm on the side here like this. Now, this is a story I often tell. The story goes much deeper than this, but it conveys what we're trying to configure as the 3 different ways, the 3 different layers of astrology. Essentially, a demon Rakshasa became obsessed with power, and he wanted to take over all of space. And so the gods asked Vishnu, as they always do, to come help them when they need help. And Vishnu said, all right, I'm going to trick this guy. I'm going to come as a dwarf star, a tiny little atom. Now, the tiny little Vishnu comes to this ego demon, and the demon is actually a servile. It's the ego, but even the ego recognizes divinity, but it didn't in the moment. the ego says, hey, puny little guy. And Vishnu says, hello, sir. I'd just like a boon from you if you don't mind. I'd like 3 footsteps worth of land. And the ego demon says, I can give you anything. I own the cosmos. Just you puny thing, you want 3 steps? Vishnu says, yep, that's all I want. And he gets granted the 3 steps. And with his first step, he takes over deep space, the sidereal nakshatra, the sidereal space of the 27 nakshatras. Next, he takes local space, the tropical zodiac. And then next, he takes the geomantic space, which is the houses, the horizon, etc. That's the final step where basically Vishnu steps on the ego's head. So there's much more to that story, but it's illustrative of the fact that there are 3 locales of astrological reckoning. There's the sidereal zodiac, the tropical zodiac, and then the houses. And they're different. They're all different. So in this series, I want to convey the essence of the nakshatras as they are without the sign associations, because the signs are not married to the nakshatras. So this is a theme that has been very important in my work and in this series. As a tropical Vedic astrologer, we believe that, or we have the understanding that the tropical 12 signs are revolving around the sidereal sphere. That being the case, we don't have the idea that any sign is married to a particular nakshatra. When you hear a lot of literature that comes from the Indian tradition, it often is conveyed that a certain nakshatra is bound by the sign that it falls into. Simple example, it's often regarded that Revati relates with Pisces in the fish, but now in today's time, Revati falls more into Aries. It's often regarded that Jesta relates to the scorpion, and that's where the moon is debilitated. And the Indian tradition says that that's where a lot of Jesta nakshatra gets its venom. But nowadays, Jesta actually falls into tropical Sagittarius. So how do we separate the ancient idea of the unity of the sign and nakshatra? How do we separate those? Well, what we would need to do, we already know enough about the zodiac signs. Now what we need to do is discover qualities about the nakshatras that have nothing to do with the signs that they were once associated with. So this is what we're doing in this series, is seeking out the nature of each nakshatra outside of its traditional sign association. And the most authentic and undistorted literature we have available on the nakshatras, this authenticity and this distortion comes from what I've just mentioned. So there's one bit of literature that does not think about the nakshatras as being married to the signs. And that's the Taittiriya Brahmana. This book is a commentary on the Krishna Yajurveda. It's considered to be a continuation of it. So this is almost considered to be Vedic era literature. And that's partly why it's so authentic. It was written and worked out by sages who are stewing in the same consciousness as the people who wrote the Krishna Yajurveda. Probably not the exact same people, but it was a little bit down the line in history, but still the closest thing we have to Vedic era literature describing the nakshatras. So the distortion we've talked about is kind of twofold. Number one is what we've just mentioned. Incorrect zodiac sign associations with the nakshatras. That's due to the sidereal tropical debate. And then there's the associations with the Vimshotari Lord. It's the planet that rules the first dasha period when the moon falls in a nakshatra. So, don't be dismayed by this. I know it's a lot. For those interested, to give a quick bit of theory, if this goes over your head, don't worry. We're going to get into the nature of Dhanishta. But suffice to say, there's something in tropical Vedic and in Vedic astrology called the Mahadashas. The Mahadashas are a system of an internal clock, and it's created by finding out where the moon falls among the nakshatras. Wherever your nakshatra, wherever the moon falls, that it will begin the first Mahadasha. Whatever that first Mahadasha is, say if it falls into Dhanishta, I'll check just for the sake of it, because this is one of those things that people talk about. With Dhanishta, they say that the first Mahadasha that begins is Mars, when the moon falls into Dhanishta. So a lot of people say Dhanishta has Mars-like qualities. This is the debated thing. Vic Dicara winks and says that this is a distortion because the Vimshottari sequence wasn't created until long after the nakshatras were created. So we're trying to get past the Mars association of Dhanishta, although it's good to mention it just so everybody can see these associations. Sometimes you don't realize where something is distorted until you get a clear picture of the distortion. And it might not even be distortion. That's the tricky thing in today's time that we're trying to digest. I digress. Now, let's see here. These are the two patriarchs of the tropical Vedic astrology tradition. Of course, these two men are only carrying forward a tradition that comes from long before them. You know, according to our idea of a Vedic astrology, it's always been tropical. These are just the first two guys to go on YouTube and talk about it and make it a big commonplace scene. And even these two disagree on the exact positions of the nakshatras. So this is Ernst Wilhelm's Dhruva Galactic Center, middle of Mula, Ayanamsha, with Dhruva equatorial longitude. You'll notice it's just a little bit different from Vic Dicara's, for various reasons and in different ways. According to Vic Dicara, Dhanishta begins at 17 degrees of Aquarius and ends at about 0 degrees of Pisces. For Ernst Wilhelm, who I kind of follow a bit more in this regard, to be honest with you, Dhanishta begins at 9 degrees Aquarius and ends at 23 degrees Aquarius. Right? So that area of the zodiac, of the tropical zodiac, if your moon is basically between 10 degrees of Aquarius and 23 degrees of Aquarius, then it's probably Dhanishta Nakshatra, in my opinion. Those who follow Vic will have a slightly different idea. What's nice is that if your moon's between 17 degrees and 23 degrees of Aquarius, it'll pretty much for sure be Dhanishta. But this is what we got to do in today's time, is make peace with how the tropical zodiac is regarded with these nakshatras. You know, it's something worth mentioning here that in today's time, hello there, Monica. Happy Thanksgiving. It's nice to see you. We have to consider in today's time that as people who are following the tropical Vedic zodiac, it's hard to exactly pinpoint where the old nakshatras fall in relation to the tropical zodiac these days. So this is just something, there'll always be different people with different ideas of it. I'd rather give the two main ones so you can digest for yourself. Feel free to email me, ask me any questions about it, because it's an important and tricky subject these days. Now, let's start getting into, I guess at this point I'll say, we are now going to start getting into the qualities of Dhanishta. Thank you for your patience. It only took all of 14 minutes to do my intro. Now, it is the time for us to start actually thinking about what Dhanishta Nakshatra is all about. And before we do, we're going to observe the classically given character quality of this nakshatra. This is done in several ways. There are 4 classical nakshatra characteristics. They are not given directly in the Taittiriya Brahmana Sutras, although I think that the Taittiriya Brahmana does discuss them a little bit. Some of what we read here may have been culled by cultural commentaries and licentious authors based on the 2 distortion points we've already mentioned. Just keep an open mind. You know, it's possible that people could say these qualities come from the fact that There's an old association with the signs. So this is where we have to keep our open mind, still read these old qualities, because a lot of these are still valid and still useful. And we have to just digest what's what in today's time. It's worth going through these. Ernst Wilhelm, I've asked him, and he says that these qualities are actually, in fact, useful. So let's include them in our reading. We have the activity. We have the 7 qualities of the nakshatras. We have the sexual yoni animal. And we have the kingdom. And we could see them here. So these are our movable and ephemeral, our chara nakshatras. This is amongst those 7 qualities. Dhruva, chara, tikshna, mridu. Chara means movable. So there is a movable quality to all of these nakshatras. There is an ephemeral, a sort of light touching. There's an uprootedness that is involved with each of these nakshatras. They're a little bit etheric. They're very, movable is really just a great way to put it. So what's interesting about Dhanishta is that amongst the movable types, it is the plant nakshatra. So this is just like in Western astrology, what we know of, like, Scorpio is one of the water signs, but it's the fixed water sign. So that gives it a different defining quality. In the same way, we can see these with the nakshatras. Dhanishta, its god is Vasu, which is really regarded as tangible goods. And the meaning literally means abundance. Now, the ancient ruler is Mars. That's what we were talking about as the Vimshotari lord. It's considered to be an active type of nakshatra. So it's active, it's chara, movable. Its yoni animal is the female lion. So it's sort of more of a feminine energy. Most of these chara types are female energies, except for the svati, which is the male buffalo. Now, it's worth mentioning that Dhanishta belongs to the plant Mula kingdom of animals. So this is something that I always like to spend a hot minute on. Oh, cool. Hello there, my friend. Glad to have you here and listening to Dhanishta Nakshatra. So Dhanishta it carries these qualities. It's chara, it's a movable, ephemeral, etheric, uprooted type. It's active. It is, what else am I missing here? It is, well, all of these different qualities relate to it. But it's active, it's chara, and it's considered to be a plant, a Mula nakshatra. Now, Ernst Wilhelm gives particular credence to the animal, the kingdom that nakshatra belongs to. In the case of Dhanishta, we have the plant Mula types. So we can see a little bit of a relationship with the kingdom as regards the flow of tropical signs in the 12 sign zodiac. We have the cardinal signs relates to dhatu, which is mineral. We have the fixed signs relate to plant Mula types, and then the mutable signs relate to the animal jiva type. The fixed signs are the plant signs, the Mula signs. So just like how the fixed signs in astrology, we know that the fixed signs fixate on something and they do whatever they got to do to make that thing work. They'll borrow a little bit from the mineral world. They'll borrow a little bit from the human world in order to do what they got to do. So the minerals, the mineral nakshatras, are solid. They often look in their local area. They don't go too far outside of their area. This is like, imagine a mechanic who goes around town asking people to give them their scrap junk car parts. They know the town. They know the people in town very closely, right? On the other hand, we have the jiva, the animal types. And these are the most, globalized consciousness. So the jiva animal types, instead of knowing about the people in their locale, they use the internet, they use paper, they get attached to the bigger way lines of trends in global currents. The plant type is someone who works between these two. The plant Mula Nakshatra is someone who can, build a business, use the people around in their business, but also take the resources that are from the locale and bring it to the upper, higher echelons of global capitalist commerce. The plant types are this type of person. They are very communicative, but they are also able to dig their nose into a specific ground, a specific field, whatever field you might be in. If you're a researcher who's a medical researcher, you might look all over the world for different ways that, this medicine that you're researching is dealt with. But also you're going to get your hands dirty, go into your local hospital and see and apply the techniques, apply the medicine in a way that you can see how for yourself in your hands, with your eyes, how this medicine works and what it's doing for people. So the plant types can do a bit of both. You'll find, especially as a Chara nakshatra, Dhanishta is somebody who really knows how to plug itself into networks, just like a plant does, like its root system. Dhanishta is a networker, and they're the type of networker that is really always moving, changing, transforming. It's an active nakshatra. So they are really pressing buttons, seeing what works, trying different things out, experimenting and exploring with whatever job, whatever thing they're creating, whatever invention they're onto, whatever research they're doing. They are somebody who's a good networker. And this is part of Dhanishta's thing. And as we're going to learn, the networking that Dhanishta does brings them into awareness of tangible objects of productive wealth, usefulness, tangible goods. That's almost, in some ways, that's what vasu, a tangible good, something that is tangible, practically good, that everybody can see its goodness. Its goodness shines. It's eternally useful. This is, in some ways, how we can define vasu, which is part of that's the deity of Dhanishta. As we can see here, the Vasus are the devas that rule Dhanishta. Dhana means wealth, and Ishta means things that are talked about. So Dhanishta, that's often what happens with Vedic grammar. You'd have Dhana, and then Ishta. You take away the A in Dhana, it becomes Dhanishta. And Ishta is things that like to be talked about. Dhana is wealth. Another name for this nakshatra is Shravista, which is actually described, as we're going to see in the Nakshatra Sutra. And Shravista, Shrava means a thing that, again, a sort of popular and famous thing, Shrava. Again, that people love to talk about. So we're going to get to that as we go along. Now, let's move forward. Once we get to this part of the reading, we're going to start getting into the sutra structure of the Taittiriya Brahmana. So if you've been watching so far, thanks for being a part of this. We've learned a little bit about Dhanishta already. Now's the time breaker. I like to do this to let myself know how to break my video into pieces. We've learned about Dhanishta, how it's a networking sign, a networking nakshatra. It's light on its feet, it's chara, it's movable, it's active, it mixes itself in with different people. It likes to get its fingers into many different things, and it has an idea. It likes to innovate. It doesn't like to stay stuck on some idea, some object, some work, some project for too long. It's an innovator. It likes to move and break and shake things up. And it does this in order almost to sort of sift through the world to find the raw ore of goodness, of tangible good within whatever it's shaking up. this is partly why Dhanishta gets famous. This is why Dhanishta gets it learns very by taste, by etheric sense, what objects in the world and what people, what resources are going to bring reputable goodness and fame. Dhanishta is one of the fame nakshatras, as we're going to talk about as we go on. Now, in order to really dig into what we understand about Dhanishta, we're going to hear from what is said about Dhanishta from the Taittiriya Brahmana. And that's this literature that I said was very old. It's about 2,000 years old, longer than that actually, 3,000 to 4,000 years old, which is very, very old. Long before the horoscope was invented, the Vedic tradition was talking about these nakshatras. And the literature we're about to read is one of the primary pins of nakshatra understanding. So the Nakshatra Sutras are a collection of 27 little aphorisms. It's just each one of them is a 1, 2, 3, 4, like a 6-piece line of text that they have memorized. Now, this is just like, there's a cleverness that comes from the rishis. This is back in a time when they didn't have writing. They didn't have any way to write things down. So what they did was they created sutras that have a rhyme to them, that have a limerick to them, that allowed them to memorize through the way the sutra is. You know, a sutra, like a doctor's sutram, if you have a gash in your arm, you can stitch it up with sutram. So what you see on the surface is the stitched up flesh. But if you were to take that sutra out, there's a whole wide gap. It's like an iceberg. You see the stitching on the top, but there's a whole iceberg of meaning underneath it. So this is how the sutras work. They say one thing. They say this 6-line phrase. But if you understand the words and also the melody structure of the sutra, you're going to find upon deep contemplation that the deep meaning of the nakshatra will come to you. And that's why they say that it's a profound thing if you have this as your native nakshatra, if your moon is there, or if any huge concentration of planets are there, or if you have Rahu or Ketu here. It can be very illuminating to memorize the meaning of these sutras, to contemplate them, and to allow the jewels at the bottom of the ocean to radiate up through your own intuitive superconscious. And that is the nature of these sutras. That's what they were created for. There's the essence of each nakshatra is in these brilliant sutras. Now, this is their structure. Each one of them has a structure. At the top, we have the true nakshatra name, the ancient name. And sometimes the name that we use for the nakshatra is different than the name given in the sutra. And that is obscure names are used sometimes because the names will have different phonetic resonance and they'll convey more information about the nakshatra. So we have A is the pink word. That's the deity that rules the nakshatra in classic Vedic literature. The word in white is the name of the nakshatra. Usually the name will convey what the deity is doing. The word in yellow is the word that is considered the foundation from above. And that's what's needed for this nakshatra to function properly. And then the word padastat is always there. Padastat and avastat are always the same. Pada, like parachute, it means that the yellow word, the previous word, comes from above. And then avastat means that the blue word has fallen below from above. So the blue word is the foundation below. This is what this nakshatra desires to produce. So you take the raw yellow word and it produces the refined blue word. That's what each nakshatra is looking to do. This is how sutras work. There's this 6-line melodies and or the six note line, and each slot also conveys information. This is part of the power of the sutra, to convey such information in such a small little 6-line sutra. So let's start to move through it, folks. As we can see, this nakshatra was once typically called Shravishta. Now I've got to make sure I've got this right, because I kind of blew it there. Really, Shrava is something that people love to talk about. And then Ishta is actually just something that people love. So Dhanishta, Dhana means wealth that people love, that are useful. Shrava means something that people love to talk about. Ishta is something that people love, and Shrava is things that people talk about. So this implies things that are popular and famous and desirable. That's what the name of this nakshatra essentially means. So let's start to dig into it. This is the Nakshatra Sutra. So what we're going to do for all those who are watching, this is what we always do on my show. What we do is we're going to read from 2 different source texts. I'm spilling everything. Sorry, give me one moment. That's okay. So, I don't have the front page of it, I guess, but this is a tiny little book that I have downloaded from Ernst Wilhelm. Yes. So, what I'm going to show you guys is where I get this information from on the part of Ernst Wilhelm. So, what I do is I go to what I've downloaded from Ernst Wilhelm, and this is called the energies of the 27 lunar nakshatras. Voila, and you can see it's kind of a little bit difficult to see, but there is the picture of, I believe that's a Aditya, and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 horses, if I'm not mistaken. This is the Nakshatra Sutras from the Taittiriya Brahmana as translated by Ernst Wilhelm. So you can go to his website and you'll find that he offers the energies of the 27 lunar mansions, and he does it for free. God bless him. It is an important work that I highly recommend, and that's what we're going to read as the second bit. This here is Ernst Wilhelm's depiction of this Nakshatra Sutra. But before we get there, we're going to do the Nakshatra Sutra. Then we're going to talk about Ernst Wilhelm's translation, and then we're going to talk about the translation given by Vic Dicara. Vic Dicara is the one who has really delved into the Nakshatra Sutras. He knows Sanskrit just like Ernst Wilhelm does. What I like to convey both of these men's depictions of the meaning of these sutras. Ernst Wilhelm is a little bit esoteric. He's more raw. He gives it to it in a way that's supposed to be enigmatic. So when you read Ernst Wilhelm's translation of a Nakshatra Sutra, you hear it and it's like it doesn't make sense in English. Almost like it's not supposed to. It doesn't have a grammatic flow. There's no conclusive meaning to what is being said there. Ernst Wilhelm does it this way because it gives you the prompt to try and invoke and emerge with what you think the sutra means. And then Vic Dicara has done a little bit of work in narrowing it down, filing it down to get down to the essence of what the nakshatra means. So I like to convey both. It's a good way to deal with these sutras, to have a wide scope and then to have a narrow scope. So before we do, first, let's get into our Jupiter a little bit. Let's get into our ears. let's enter the soundscape of the classical spoken Nakshatra Sutra. And just in case I don't do this justice, and it's very well possible that I don't, what is commonly done, what I recommend people to do. There's my old video from my old band. You can go Vic Dicara Dhanishta. Oh my gosh, come on. Vic Dicara Dhanishta. Oh, look, there's me live. So Shravishta Nakshatra, that's 8 years ago. The one you would really want is... There should be one that's relatively new. And I guess it would be this one. Because that would be the... He did a old series and then a new series. Yeah, so this would be the one. You go to Vic Dicara's video, How to Be Rich, Famous, and Gorgeous, the life lesson of Dhanishta Nakshatra. And in there, you will find the Nakshatra Sutra. You will find him describing his description as of the Nakshatra Sutra itself. If you ever want to contemplate it, I suggest you get it from Vic Dicara in case I make any mistakes. This is just me being humble, but I've gotten pretty good at this, so let's see how to do it. This is more just bringing us into the tradition of this is how this is typically conveyed, is by moving through the Nakshatra Sutra itself in order for us to contemplate it and digest it. These vibrations in our minds inherently bring up the meaning that has been cooked into the sutra. So you can read either from the bottom one or the top one. Now there's a few things you want to know. Usually when there's a line on top, it means that there are two vowels that are being combined together. And a lot of times it usually means that it's not going to be as quick of a word. Vasunam. You know, you almost want to say the U has two U's, and then the A has two A's. Vasunam. When you see an S with a tiny little accent on top of it or below it, there's none below it here. Oh, yes. We have both, actually. They are slightly different. There's a sh, which I believe is the S with the dot on the bottom, and then sh, it's kind of like a snake hissing, is the S with the little accent on top. Shravishtaha. And whenever you have a dot on the bottom of an H, you're going to have a H sound. So this one's interesting. The Shravishtaha is, I'm getting there. So let's move through the whole thing. I'm going to do it just basically what it is Vasunam Shravishtaha Bhutam. Remember when you do Bhu? When you have an H in front of a B, it's like Bhu. Bhutam Parastad Bhutir Avastat. And there is a melody to it that Vic Dicara describes as well. So the melody, with everything pulled together, it sounds a little bit like this. Hopefully you guys can see me here. Yes, you can. So the whole thing flows like this. Vasunam Shravishta Bhutam Parastad Bhutiravastat. Oh, and I should have started with Om. Om Vasunam Shravishta Bhutam Parastad Bhutiravastat. Om Vasunam Shravishta Bhutam Parastad Bhutiravastat. So this is the general conveyance of the sutra. if this is your natal nakshatra, or if you have Rahu or Ketu there and you're going through some Rahu Ketu stuff, think about this sutra, think about it, what it means, roll it through your brain, go out and have a fire. Have a nice little mystical fire, feed it some ghee, feed it some apple slices, feed it some sweets, it loves sweets, and have this nakshatra in front of you, listen to the audio, and then ruminate on it yourself. Feel the words flowing through your tongue and your mouth, and allow the inherent wisdom of this nakshatra to move through you during whatever important Rahu Ketu experience you're having. If you're in Rahu dasha, Ketu dasha, if it is the Rahu eclipse, you can think about the eclipse of the nakshatra where the eclipse is falling, or you can think about the sutra of the eclipse where it's falling, or you can think about your own north node nakshatra or south node nakshatra if it falls in Dhanishta. And you will find that there are relevant energies that move through your tongue and consciousness. It's a very powerful technique, very powerful exercise to flow through with. So let's now convey the meaning of the words of this nakshatra. Shravishtaha is considered the most famous of the Vasu deities. And that is Vasunam Shravishtaha. That's really what that phrase means. Vasunam is the Vasus, the Vasu deities. And Shravishtaha really means the most famous of them. So the most famous of the Vasus is Bhutam above and Bhutir below. Vasunam is plural, Vasu is singular, and then Vasunam is plural. And this is of the Vasus, the good or excellent ones. And it also can relate to the supporting. That's i.e. the earth, water, the pole star, moon, wind, fire, dawn, and light. And we're going to talk a little bit about how Vic Dicara conveys these different Vasus. But that is Vasunam. It's the 8 elements. There's the 5 elements we all know. It's the Panchatattvas. And then there's the sun, moon, and stars. Or as is given by Ernst Wilhelm, the pole star. Now we have also, there's the Vasunam, and then we have Shravishtaha, and that is the most famous. Again, Ishtaha are things that are loved, and Shrava are things that are enjoyed, that people enjoy talking about. So when people enjoy talking about something, that is what gives it that famous quality. So that's the most famous of the Vasu deities, is Bhutam. And Bhutam here means the past, or what has come. And Padastat, of course, means from above. That's what's required. The past is required in order for things to be thriving. That's essentially what this is saying. Bhutam Padastat Bhutir Avastat. The past is the foundation that creates Bhutir, which is thriving. So overall, Ernst Wilhelm's enigmatic, rather purposefully unclear translation of the sutra goes, the most famous ones of the Vasunaha are the past from above and the thriving below. This is how we can come to understand Dhanishta. Now, let's start digging a little bit more into the deeper essential meaning and groove to be expected from this nakshatra. And I'm going to, again, just to check. Yes, looks like we're okay. So now we're digging into Vic Dicara's depiction of this Nakshatra Sutra. we see that Vasu really means objects, treasures, material, tangible goods. Vasunam basically means plural. It's the things that we can all regard as being useful, tangible goods. Now, Shravishta means desired things, things that catch our ear. This partly relates to the profoundly musical, melodic nature of Dhanishta. You know, these people can make good songwriters. They know how to create a melody. They have melody inside them. Bhuta means, again, tangible objects. It's interesting that this is different from what Ernst Wilhelm gives us as the past. There is a reason that Ernst gives his depiction. There is obviously some connection of bhuta or bhutam to the past as well as tangible objects. And then bhuti is what is wealth. It's essentially what this nakshatra seeks to produce. So Dhanishta, now this, by the way, you know, this picture of these definitions, as well as the little good and negative that can come from this nakshatra, this comes from vicdicara.com. Vic Dicara has a wonderful Nakshatra Sutras lecture on his website. It's actually a series of lectures for each nakshatra. I highly recommend it. It's very deep, very all-encompassing, and very thorough if you want to get a deep sense of what these nakshatras are all about as they are given in the Taittiriya Brahmana. So Dhanishta Nakshatra is good financially and for enjoyment and artistic sensibilities, particularly for audio. So we can expect that there are certain things that would be good here, including Jupiter, especially because it relates to the ear. Jupiter, Venus, the moon, and Mercury can do well in Dhanishta, and we're going to see this conveyed by Vic Dicara as we go along. Now, what's not good is when anything gets wrapped up in Dhanishta that relates to a sense of poverty or materialism. This is somebody who can become, even when the moon is there, your Amakarika is there, your Lagna is there, your rising sign, or you have a bunch of planets there, especially malefic planets, they can tend to bring out this sense of being poverty-stricken. I don't have anything good. I don't have the tangible objects. I don't have the resources. My past has cursed me so that I cannot produce wealth or good tangible items. This is what somebody with a negative experience of Dhanishta can feel and can experience. It's a poverty mindset for them because they don't have enough. They weren't given enough riches, right? So this is two different two different ways of conveying the essential wisdom given in this nakshatra. Both of these come from Vic Dicara. One of them was from his earlier sutra work, and then he refined it in his book, Nakshatra, The Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology, which is a book that we're actually going to be reading from. This book is sort of the condensation of Vic Dicara's work on the Nakshatra Sutras. But he gives us two different ways of conveying the meaning inside the sutra. Number one is ear-catching objects need tangible resources to become wealth. So it's almost like there's this idea of a desirable object. There's this eternal idea of a good idea. You know, Dhanishta can make great inventors. You know, when somebody figured out Rock'em Sock'em robots. You know, you press a button and this thing punches, but if the guy blocks, you know, it's a good idea. It's a desirable object. So whoever invented this idea of Rock'em Sock'em robots is like, okay, how do we put this thing together? Well, we need the resources. We need the right connections. We need to know who's in the business of Hasbro, who's creating toys. We need to get the plastic. We need to get a manufacturer for the plastic to make it all manufactured in a certain way. And we need somebody who will manufacture the toy itself. So the Rock'em Sock'em Robots was a good idea. But they needed the tangible resources in order to turn that idea into wealth. And this is not only useful for anybody with karma related to Dhanishta, but this is also the lesson of Dhanishta for all of us. Desirable objects need tangible resources for wealth. What's nice is that each of these nakshatras has inherent perennial wisdom for us to understand. Now, this is a little summary that's just here to convey how all of the nakshatras are sort of grouped together. And the vasus themselves are an elemental category. We can see here there's really, if you guys have ever heard the Gayatri mantra, when you do the Gayatri mantra, it is considered to be really the most sacred of Vedic mantras. And it invokes the three layers of being as being like one. Just like Om, when you really do the Om, there's an Ah at the back of the throat, Ooh in the midst of the mouth, and then down at the lips. That's the three layers of being. And this is further conveyed in the Gayatri mantra. Om Bhur Bhuva Svaha. Bhur is the bottom, the elements of earth, the material world, the vasus. Bhuva is the atmosphere, the egoic soul. And then Svaha is the spirit. It's the interaction of the holy higher deities and devas. And that's the adityas. So that's what we are conveying with these three levels. There's the Bhur, the vasus, which is the elements, fire, water, wind, moon, stars. And then we have the Rudras, where Shiva resides, as well as the Naga, the passions of the soul, the atmosphere. And then there's the Adityas, which is the spirit. Elements, soul, spirit. That's the three main groupings of the nakshatras. And the vasus are themselves a category. Now, Dhanishta is sort of like all of the vasus together in one nakshatra as an entity in itself, which is partly what makes Dhanishta very interesting. So that has been our depiction of Dhanishta so far. Now, let's do a bathroom break, and when I come back, we're going to go a little bit further. And we're going to start reading from Nakshatra, The Authentic Heart of Vedic Astrology by Vic Dicara, to get an even deeper sense of what Dhanishta means, what the sutras mean. Going to break down the words a little bit more, get a little bit more understanding of what Dhanishta is about, and as well, we're eventually going to read about what it means when you have Rahu and Ketu in Dhanishta. So sit tight, let's take a bathroom break. I'll see you guys in just a moment. Bonjour, mon ami. Okay. Thank you, Monica. I appreciate hearing that you're enjoying the depth that we like to go on this channel. We go as deep as we can, you know? As deep as the pool of the nakshatras will allow, and as deep as my consciousness will allow. Now, we are here, and I'm glad to have folks hanging out with me. Glad to have my friend Monica supporting me as always. Let's go in and dive deeper into nakshatra, the authentic heart of Vedic astrology. In here, we are going to start to delve deep into what it means to be a native of this nakshatra. But before we get there, what's even more relevant at this part is to break down a little bit more of what we read from the Taittiriya Brahmana Nakshatra Sutra. And of course, that's what we would have read here. Vasunam shravishtaha bhutam parastad bhutiravastat. I gave that A a little bit too much and not enough to the U. Bhutam parastad is what I should have gone there. It's fun getting into this. What's cool about Sanskrit is that you can see how to pronounce everything, which I think they had to do it that way because pronunciation, exact pronunciation, was regarded as so important. It goes to show the magical spell-like quality of these old mantras. Saying each thing with the exact inflection is part of what brings up and invokes the spirit and energy of the mantra. So, we are now discussing Dhanishta, which relates to desirable objects. And Vic Dicara again gives us his little depiction here. Desirable objects need tangible resources for wealth. And that's essentially what we're going to be moving into as we describe this Nakshatra Sutra. Let's begin by talking about Vasu. So Vasu is, of course, the word that we read as the first bit. Vasu is described as Vasunam, which basically means the plural version of Vasu. The word Vasu indicates something that has distinct color and shape, something that can be seen. This is why it is a word used for denoting real things, things that are tangible, practical, material objects of wealth. The sutra uses the word in plural, suggesting that this nakshatra relates to a trove or a collection of such objects. This gives us the impression that Dhanishta is a nakshatra concerned with wealth and objects of enjoyment. So that's a good clue to the first impression of what this nakshatra is all about. It's a nakshatra concerned with wealth and objects of enjoyment. Now, next we have the word Shravishta. So this is, of course, the second word in our sutra, and this is considered to be the classical name of this nakshatra. Vasunam Shravishta. So, coming from essentially Shravishta, Shravishta literally means a thing that people love, Ishta, to talk about, Shrava. So Shrava means to be talking about something. This implies that this implies things that are popular and famous, as well as desirable. This confirms our impression that the nakshatra is concerned with desirable, Shravishta, objects, Vasunam. So desirable, fame-worthy, discussion-worthy, Shravishta, objects, real tangible material goods, Vasunam. Now today, the more common name for this nakshatra is Dhanishta, which has similar roots. Now, Ishta can mean very, or it's an emphasized thing. And then wealthy is Dhana, if you've ever heard the word Dhana in Vedic astrology, in Vedic literature, in yoga, in Sanskrit in general. Dhana means wealth. So Dhanishta, Dhanaishta. You wouldn't say Dhanaishta. You'd combine the A and the I, and it produces Dhanishta. And this means Dhana is wealthy, and then Ishta is something that is beloved as well as just emphasized as very. So very wealthy. Dhanishta means very wealthy. So this nakshatra certainly seems to deal with the rich and famous. Now, Vic Dicara gives us a little footnote at the bottom here. Right? And he says, other interesting derivations of these words. Shravishta may mean one who has wandered far away. That comes from shru plus ap equals shrava plus ishtan. And dhanishta may mean one who moves very swiftly away, as if in search of some kind of treasure. I'm going to get my chat back here. So there's this swift moving away as if in search of some kind of treasure. These meanings are interesting because the actual stars of this nakshatra are far north of the ecliptic and are not quite centered within their own nakshatra field. That is a very astronomical connotation that Vic Dicara is giving. Vic Dicara, especially for a long time, and in general, he's big on this idea that there's the space of the nakshatra, there's the ecliptic, and then there's the actual stars that make up the nakshatra. Whether they're close to the ecliptic or not says something about the nature, quality, and character of the nakshatra native in question. The stars that are the essential stars in this nakshatra are far from the ecliptic. So this is far away going person that's implied somewhat in the consciousness of Dhanishta. Now, the next word we have in this sutra is bhuta. Bhuta is a past perfect form of the verb to be. And this is somewhat what is meant by Ernst Wilhelm when he conveyed this word as relating to the past. You know, it's like, you know, in English we have to be, like, you know, that's a verb case. And then we could say something was, right? So something is beautiful, something was beautiful. Is and was are conjugations of the same be, to be. So in the same way, bhuta is a past perfect form of the verb to be. So it literally means something that has come into being. In Vedic terms, this word is used in contrast to things that have always existed. According to the Veda, consciousness is the thing which has always existed and which always exists. And tangible objects are bhuta, the things that consciousness has brought into being. Psychedelic. Our consciousness is eternal, perennial. It's this humming engine of creation. So we wouldn't call consciousness bhuta. We would call the objects that spin in and out, the energies that move through our soul, our eternal soul, are bhuta, are these things that come into being, that come into creation. Now, so bhuta is this ability to have things come into consciousness, come into creation. And that's what's required, that's the padastat, in order to develop on bhuti. Of course, there are very similar roots, right? Bhuta and then bhuti. Same word, except that it's an I instead of an A. So the word bhuti means existing, living, growing, producing, prospering, thriving, attaining prosperity, wealth, and power. So this is almost like, the thing that has been created and brought into being, the objects, the bhuta, has now power, shakti, moving through it. A particular instrument, a wand, something that is a channel for the bhuta, has become a channel for the infinite energy of consciousness, and that's what makes it bhuti. That's what gives it this living, existing, growing, producing, prospering, thriving power. So now let's read in summary what is being conveyed by this Nakshatra Sutra. Vasunam Shravishtaha. It's this treasure trove of objects that people love to talk about. And the Vasus themselves, as a deity, as a god, as a living embodiment of the multifold manifestations of consciousness, the Vasus themselves are this elemental aspect of creation. And Bhuta is objects created through the field of the Vasudevas. The Vasunam, the Vasus. And Bhuti is the radiance that comes through the Vasunam. The objects that people love to talk about. It's almost like all tangible, good, beautiful things are an eternal existing idea. Again, we could use the Rock'em Sock'em robots. We could use even a knife. A knife is such a brilliant instrument. It's this sharp thing that people can carve out of rock. You take a piece of metal, you sharpen it until it's pointy. You can use it to cut things. That's a brilliant idea. It can always be used. You need the raw metal. You need the thing to sharpen it. This is a desirable material object. The idea of a knife is eternal. It's always there. And so this is this thing that can be created and channeled in order to produce the radiance of goodness. And somebody can even make a business out of making these things. So in summary, Dhanishta Nakshatra wants to be and produce objects, Vasunam, that are famous, Shravishta, due to being excellent, desirable, and attractive, Bhuti. Doing so requires Bhuti, tangible material resources, raw assets, and fundamental talents. Raw assets and fundamental talents being a key part of Dhanishta Nakshatras. Again, that's that plant, the Mula nature of this nakshatra. Somebody knows how to connect the right people in order to make this idea that's a brilliant, desirable thing that everyone's going to love to talk about happen. The ability to transmute these raw materials into beauty, prosperity, fame, and wealth is the special talent of Dhanishta Nakshatra. Beautiful. There's a lot there. That's a great summary of what can be expected and understood of Dhanishta Nakshatra. Now, let's dig into the next section of what we're getting into here is we're going to get into now the life lesson that can be expected from Dhanishta. Before we get into interpretive stuff, we're now going to read into the life lesson that is given that we can digest from Dhanishta Nakshatra. Now, these are life lessons that the person with Dhanishta Nakshatra should pay particular attention to, a native of this nakshatra. But we can all gain an understanding from Dhanishta Nakshatra by reading into what Vic Dicara has condensed into his life lesson on the subject. Vic Dicara tells us the life lesson of Dhanishta is that bhuta generates bhuti, which really means wealth generates wealth. Success generates success. Fame generates fame. Beauty generates beauty. Well then, what should we do if we don't have wealth, beauty, etc.? Will we remain forever poor, unknown, ugly failures? The word vasunam, which in some ways translates to of all objects, gives us the answer. This nakshatra tells us, and this Nakshatra Sutra tells us, that all things have some form of wealth, talent, and beauty, by which they can gain prosperity, fame, and success. All objects have some of this bhuta. And what we have to learn to do is accept the type of assets we have, rather than wishing we had some other type and ignoring what we do have. This will be especially important when we read interpretations of planets as well as Rahu and Ketu in this sign, is knowing what good we have, knowing how to make it something worth talking about. By focusing on the assets that we do have, we activate them, we use them, we polish them, and we bring them to the fore, where they begin to shine, vasu. They attract attention, and they thus generate prosperity, fame, and wealth. Amazing. Glad to have you, my friend. Losing it, Rush. Very glad to have a Dhanishta native listening to us putting it down. So, Vic Dicara gives a little supplication. And this supplication actually comes from the Taittiriya Brahmana. It's a little bit of extra commentary on what can be expected from this Nakshatra Sutra. Neil Peart had Rahu and Dhanishta. Amazing. We're going to read about Rahu and Ketu and Dhanishta, so maybe we'll try to read into how this might relate to Neil Peart. It's interesting because the sign of Dhanishta, one of the key symbols of Dhanishta, is a drum, the Indian tabla. It's regarded as one of the timekeepers in a way of keeping time. Very interesting. So, as for our supplication, this is our supplication, our prayer to Dhanishta Nakshatra. We read, the 8 divinities, Vasu, seek pleasure, Soma. They make 4 pairs of royal divinity in Shravishta. They help endeavors that depend on passions. They allow nectar to flow all year. May they guide our endeavors. May Shravishta propel them. May this nakshatra permeate us with virtue, so hatred and ignorance does not approach us. I love how in the Vedic cosmology, material objects are not considered to be separate from spirituality. The 3 the 3 layers of cosmos all relate as one central essence, even though they are divided and one. Just like the Trinity of Christianity, the Trinity of Vedic cosmology, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, they are considered as 3 aspects of the same one being, the same one reality. So, I'm glad that I got to share that with you guys. Now, the next part of our book is we're going to start getting into the interpretive dimension of Dhanishta Nakshatra. So what can be expected when we are interpreting planets as well as the nodes as they fall in to this nakshatra? Excuse me. So, let's rock and roll. First is our interpretation of planets falling into Dhanishta Nakshatra. What is said by Vic Dicara is that Dhanishta is welcome and desirable wherever beauty, desirability, fame, and financial success is desired. One might think, okay, I mean, that's basically everywhere. You can kind of find that in a lot of things, in anything. But the truth is that Dhanishta, what's regarded here is that Dhanishta is not the best nakshatra for internal and non-material prosperity and happiness. Its bread is buttered on the side of material abundance, material wellness, fame, being talked about, becoming a celebrity, and these sorts of things. And Vic Dicara is winking here that anybody with certain planetary alignments with Dhanishta, particularly Rahu and Ketu, should be aware of the nature of this material prosperity as being a part of your soul reality, but should not be, don't let the material tail wag the spiritual dog. The spirituality should come first, and then your material desires can be in alignment with your deeper desire. So, planets connected with prosperity and wealth tend to bring out the positive side of Dhanishta. That's Venus, Jupiter, Moon, Mercury, and perhaps Rahu, as Vic Dicara says. Rahu can have a bit of that positive side of Dhanishta. Now, planets that are less adept in beauty and prosperity tend to bring out difficulties in Dhanishta. This includes Saturn, Ketu, Mars, and the Sun. So Saturn, Ketu, Mars, and the Sun can have a little bit more difficulty when it comes to dealing with this Dhanishta energy. We can see how each one of those planets are not intended to care about the luster, the shine. They're more about raw, vital force. And the element of concise, clear ingenuity, beauty, radiance of character. The Sun, Mars, Ketu, and Saturn can almost be obstructed by the need to deal with that part of reality, of Dhanishta reality. When Dhanishta functions well, it indicates fame, especially with the Moon or Jupiter. Wealth, especially with Venus, Mercury, or Jupiter. It indicates beauty, especially with Venus or the Moon. And it indicates artistic talents, especially with Venus, Mercury, or the Moon. So there's an artistic talent inside this nakshatra. Keep in mind that it's always important to note that especially a planet that's doing well, all these planets are already well placed in Dhanishta. They correlate naturally with Dhanishta. But if the Moon is here and it has aspects from Jupiter, Mars, or the Sun, especially its friend, the Sun or Mercury, if Venus is here and it's got aspects from a positive aspect from Saturn or Mercury, its friends, these are the kind of things that will really bring out the good qualities. And each of these planets, let's say Venus and the Moon are conjunct in the sign of Dhanishta, there would be an overdone desire to be wealthy, to be regarded as wealthy, to be regarded as having status and money and all these things. But generally speaking, these are the conveyances. Fame comes from Moon and Jupiter here. Wealth comes from Venus, Mercury, or Jupiter here. Beauty comes from Venus or the Moon here. Artistic talent comes from Venus, Mercury, or Moon here. And Dhanishta is particularly well known for talent in dance, especially when the moon is here. Dance, it's amazing that dance is such a multifaceted thing. It contains the raw vital force of vitality, of talent, of music. There's a musicality that's necessary there. You need to have a sharp body that can move with the movements. But dance also involves beauty. It can involve opulence. It can involve looking the part, having clothes that reflect on the nature of the dance. So dance is very much a good gumball, a good condensed figure of Dhanishta. When Dhanishta functions poorly, Dhanishta indicates an inability to find or utilize the resources and talents in oneself and one's environment. So this is when Dhanishta is not doing well, especially with Saturn or Ketu. This tends to be accompanied by self-doubt and self-criticism. So really, Saturn, Ketu, Mars, and the Sun are going to indicate an inability to find or utilize resources and talents in oneself and in one's environment. These are planets, Sun, Saturn, Mars, and Ketu have nakshatras where they can do well. This is a nakshatra where the indications of the nakshatra tend to sort of mar and cause a little bit of difficulty for these planets. So if you're somebody who has Sun, Saturn, Mars, or Ketu inside of Dhanishta, and you find that it's tough for you have an inability to utilize the resources around you, the talents, to find the bhuta, what has come from before me, what objects have been given to me in my life, what talents have my parents given me, what talents do my parents have, what comes from my ancestry, what comes from my culture, what gifts have I been given that have inherent beauty inside of them, which I can call my own and find the beauty inside them and use to radiate beauty out into the world. I can't find those things. I wasn't given those things. Other people have those things and I don't. If you find yourself saying this and you have Sun, Mars, Saturn, or Ketu inside of Dhanishta, it might be worthwhile for you to think about how much that might be in your head, how much that might be an illusion, how much you're moving through a karma. And at some level, if you feel this way, you might be moving through a karma related to this. You might be moving through the karma of Dhanishta, the negative side of Dhanishta, which is, oftentimes the position of planets in a nakshatra, the cosmos puts pressure on us to feel the negative side of that nakshatra in order that we can see that the ego loves its favorite pain, and its favorite pain is going to be its essence, because the essence of Dhanishta is goodness, wealth, luxury, abundance, fame, being talked about for your talents and reputation. That's a part of your essence. Sometimes we can't find the essence until we go through the shadow of lacking that essence. Especially with Saturn or Ketu, this tends to be accompanied by self-doubt and self-criticism. We can really see where Saturn would come through with this. Saturn in Dhanishta would be tough as nails. Saturn has no desire to keep up with appearances. And so Saturn would enter these spheres. Saturn might have karma that puts you in the realm of reputation of other people, of getting you out there, of celebrity. And you might come about in that world as being very, sort of stark, choppy, bland, not thinking about, not throwing them the bread, not giving a shit about what people think about you. There's a divinity there, because that is part of Saturn's quality. but that, you're putting a gray stone in a lush basket, and it's going to stand out in contrast. But this is still your karma. This is still part of who you are, and there's still vital lessons to be learned by this kind of karma. And you can still make well out of it. Every planet and every nakshatra can have good, vital aspects to it. In this case, though, we can see why there is some, there's some difficulty here that philosophically needs to be digested by you. In this case, especially what you need to what you need to watch for is self-doubt and self-criticism. Ketu and Saturn, Ketu especially, would feel inherently, incessantly, because Ketu is such a moksha liberation sign. Ketu would get almost nasty about being frustrated for what Dhanishta is, wealth, prosperity, to get, it's like this ugly thing to Dhanishta, Ketu. And we're going to talk about that now as we start to get into the Rahu Ketu analysis. But before we do, keep in mind, for the sake of our interpretation here, it's important to recognize the lesson that we learned, which is that all things, all objects have inherent prosperity, beauty, bhuta inside of them. And if you don't see that bhuta, if you don't see the goodness inside of you and what you've been given, it's probably a head trip. It's probably something, a feeling like, no way, I don't believe it. There couldn't be any good thing inside of me. And it's probably something that you've made yourself believe, whereas in reality, there is goodness inside of all objects. You just need to change the way that you think about it. And especially with Saturn and Ketu, your self-doubt and self-criticism might be blinding you to the inherent goodness that are inside of all objects. Very good. Now, everybody, let's move on to the next section, breaker. We've done our interpretation of the planets. Now we're going to start to read the life lesson. Not the life lesson. We're now going to read the Rahu and Ketu positions of Dhanishta. What does it mean when you have Rahu or Ketu in the sign of Dhanishta? The interpretations are different, obviously, between these two nodes. A lot of the times they can be similar. Sometimes they're good or bad. Often they're different, though. Rahu and Ketu are two very different things. Ketu does well with moksha-related nakshatras. Nakshatras that are about letting go of the material world. Nakshatras that are about coming into a sort of spiritual awareness, letting go of karma, letting go of attachments. Ketu is about that, and Dhanishta is not about that. So we can see why Ketu might have a bit more trouble in Dhanishta. There's Ketu gets, we come into the cosmos through Ketu. So there's a dimension of ourselves in Ketu that we essentially get stuck on always. It's who we are. It's the culture we come from. It's the consciousness that we are born through. And we need to integrate that consciousness. So there's not no hope for the Ketu Dhanishta person. Rather, there is a real deep, cunning sense of the real, true, stripped down beauty and wealth that is available inside of life for Ketu Dhanishta. The thing is that they can be overcritical about other people. They can be jealous of other people, and they can put themselves down. And we're going to talk a bit about that. Now, Rahu in Dhanishta is a little bit more positive, outgoing. Rahu is kind of the proper setup for Dhanishta. When you have Rahu in Dhanishta, you are okay with launching yourself out to feel and touch the material world, the goodness of it. And you will go too far with Rahu in Dhanishta. You will get wrapped up inside of the material world, inside of material providence. You will get over obsessed about what goodness is inside of you inherently. And you will look for others and try to compare yourself against the material goodness that your family has given you through providence versus the material wealth that others have been given through providence. And you'll feel, I'm lucky for these reasons and I'm a piece of crap for these reasons. And Rahu will guide you to see how this is all a stupid game. But it's still a fun game. It's a fun game to play as long as you don't take it personally. And Rahu will play the game hard. And Rahu in Dhanishta is capable of bringing people wealth and material abundance, especially if all things related to Rahu are in proper positions. If you've got a good Saturn, then that's good for Rahu. Just like having a good Mars is good for Ketu. And it can bring wealth. It can bring beauty, prosperity, and all of these things. Dhanishta is known for this. So now let's talk about to bring it all together, let's talk about what it means to have Ketu in Dhanishta. When you have Ketu in Dhanishta, you're going to have Rahu in one of two different places. And that is going to be a part of the story that you tell. You can have Ketu in Dhanishta. We always start with Ketu because Ketu is where we come from in the universe. And again, we know that the story of Ketu in Dhanishta is an over-obsession with my inherent goodness. A self-doubt, a self-criticism. And the feeling really is with Ketu and any other malefic, Saturn, Sun, Mars, in Dhanishta, but especially Ketu. It's an inability to find or utilize the resources and talents in oneself and in one's environment. Especially with Ketu, this tends to be accompanied by self-doubt and self-criticism. Because you see, I often say with astrology, when you look at all the things in astrology, all the signs, the planets, the houses, the nakshatras, the key to understanding it is that they're not a big deal. None of the things in astrology are a big deal. It's only when you have karma there that you experience and perceive it to be a big deal. Everybody has Dhanistha Nakshatra. That's why the life lesson of Dhanishta is useful for all of us, which is that every object, everything that everybody's been given, has the potential to produce goodness. Everyone has bhuta, which is their past, what their family has given them, and it's an object, it's an item. It's material. It's the gift of mother, of material. And all of it, no matter who is asking or answering the question, all of it has beauty and truth and goodness inside it. Hello there, True Blue Natalie. Nice to see you. All of us have some good objects, some good qualities, some good character inside of us. And that's the bhuta. And it's very easy for this Ketu person to have this, to not be able to find the goodness. Because we all have goodness around it, inside of us and around us in our environment. We all have the ability, we all have the same lifelines attached to the same resources, the same elements. Earth, water, fire, sun, moon, stars, ether. We all have access to the same resources. Well, that's not necessarily true, but we all have access to the same cosmic resources. And we all have the ability to tap into them inside of ourselves using our consciousness. And someone with Ketu in Dhanishta would have the experience that partly because Ketu is looking to liberate you from your egoic attachment to the feeling that I'm not good unless I have been given good objects and items. So Ketu and Dhanishta is kind of forced in their life to get over this self-criticism, if I might put it so rather harshly, to get over this self-doubt and recognize that that's a head trip. The head trip of Ketu and Dhanishta is that I'm inherently less valuable, that other people are given more than me, and that's because I am a piece of crap. And this is what life is forcing them, pushing them to see past. Now, my friend True Blue Natalie is asking, what is Dhanishta? So this is tropical Vedic astrology, and we're talking about what's called the Nakshatras, which are the authentic heart of Vedic astrology. It's the 27 signs that are unique to Vedic astrology. Right now, in particular, this whole video I've been talking about Dhanishta, which is one of the 27 signs. And people can have planets falling in that sign. It relates to wealth and beautiful items and becoming wealthy through those items. Now, right now, we're talking about Rahu and Ketu, which means what happens when Rahu and Ketu fall in Dhanishta. In particular, right now, I'm discussing Ketu in this sign, in the star asterism. Ketu often has this self-doubt and self-criticism, and they feel like they can't make anything happen with what they have. So because of this, they have to recognize, number one, a lot of that is a head trip that Ketu is putting you under, because the truth is that you don't have a disconnect. You don't have a true disconnect from beauty. It's Ketu forcing you to realize how much you're actually taking it more personally than you need to. Now, up to age 36, you're probably going to be living in this sort of gross experience of like, I don't have enough, and my environment lacks what I need. Right. The Ketu castle, that's an excellent point there, Natalie. The Ketu castle, I've been inside my castle. Up to age 36, we're in the castle. We don't see outside the world outside of it. Then we get launched into Rahu around age 36. Saturn matures, and when Saturn matures, that's what allows us to step foot outside of the castle, outside of the Ketu Dhanishta, and to see what's there for us. Now, if you have Ketu and Dhanishta, that means you either have Rahu in Ashlesha or you have Rahu in Magha. So, these are going to give you very different life experiences. Ashlesha being the earlier one. So, Rahu and Ashlesha is an interesting, tricky situation. What is regarded by Vic Dicara is that Rahu and Ketu are both very overwhelming in Ashlesha. Usually indicates a chance of being overpowered by attachments with addictive tendencies. The Rahu in Ashlesha person wants to finally prove to themselves that they are beautiful, because the Ketu in them they've always made them feel through self-doubt, through self-deprecation, through the lack of the universe giving them a feeling of prosperity and abundance. Rahu comes out in Ashlesha hard and says, especially at age 36, I know that there are things that I have which indicate intrinsic beauty, seductiveness. And there's a passion, two snakes rolling around in a serpentine embrace with each other. And the Ashlesha has an acidic, venomous desire to experience the embrace of its own seductive qualities and powers. And both of these need to reckon with how important it is to understand what's in the soul. This is a tricky placement. Dhanishta Ketu, Rahu Ashlesha. This is somebody who's needs to be illuminated to what the soul is trying to do with all this desire, which is essentially to recognize that the cosmos loves us and that we are love, and that the material world is a reflection of the love that we are inside of us. And even the feelings of lack, the feelings of not having enough, the feelings of not being enough is a kiss. It's like when we're kissing our lover, we could just go all day, all night, every day. The moment that we're kissing our lover, it's this beautiful, delicious embrace. But if we do it all the time, it doesn't make it quite as special. So when we give our lover a kiss in a rhythm, This is what Dhanishta learns. If you just are Dhanishta, and, you know, some metal drummers like to go filling in the air with notes all the time, constantly, bang, 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 bang. But a Dhanishta learns eventually that you don't need all of that sound in order to conduct the music of the cosmos. All you need is one violin string. One delicious, sharp, cutting violin string that penetrates and cuts through everybody and builds the beautiful stress and tension of a moment. And then it's that tension and release of coming back into the regular music. Dhanishta learns this. Ketu and Dhanishta learns that the universe has been giving you a no in order to make the yes that much more delicious. Now, when you get to be 36, Rahu is the yes, the big bang yes, where you just say, finally, fuck it. I'm just going to do what I got to do to get the experience that I have not been getting as a Ketu and Dhanishta person. And you're bound to go too far with that, with Ashlesha. You're bound to hit the wall with this serpentine desire to be embraced and seduced, and to seduce, and to experience the beauty and bounty of goodness and the beauty of the object that you are. And part of that Rahu dance is part of what you are, part of your karma. But eventually you'll run it out and realize that, okay, the no is what makes the yes beautiful. And eventually Ketu and Dhanishta essentially learns like Ketu does with all planets, especially if you have a good Mars and a good Ketu position, that wherever Ketu is situated is not, again, actually such a big deal. And wealth, attaining wealth, using items with wealth, you always feel like, I don't feel worthy of having money, prosperity, abundance. But through the no that you've been born into, when you get money, you'll appreciate it. When you get beauty, you'll appreciate it. When you get fame, wealth, the Ketu and Dhanishta person can appreciate it more than anybody else. So, True Blue Natalie, I'll give you I'm glad I put that well. So I'm glad that I conveyed that well. So Natalie is asking where Dhanishta would fall. In Vic Dicara's system, Dhanishta falls between 17.5 degrees of Aquarius and about 1 degree of Pisces. In Ernst Wilhelm's system, Dhanishta falls between 9.5 degrees of Aquarius and 23 degrees of Aquarius. I'm more of an Ernst Wilhelm guy. So between 10 and 23 degrees of Aquarius is pretty much going to be Dhanishta. Unfortunately, with tropical these days, it's hard for us to know exactly where the positions of these things are. But if you have Ketu falling into any of those spaces, you might have Dhanishta Ketu. And that's what we're talking about at this moment. Now, when Dhanishta Ketu has Magha for its Rahu position, it's going to be a little bit different. Really, what we read about with Magha is that a lot of it, Magha can be very conservative, and Magha is a sort of authoritarian position that comes from Pitrinam. Magha is like deputed power, like a deputy. The state, the government, has given you deputed power as a deputy to be the sheriff. Or really, the sheriff is the one who runs things, and the deputy is the person who the sheriff has given power to. So, Pitrinam Magha is the power given from the invested forefathers. This can be a person who is very sensitive to their grandfather, who has given their power to their father, who's given their power to them, or their grandmother. But it's mostly a patriarchal lineage. The father, grandfather power from our father's side. And again, this also relates to government. This can relate to authority that comes from masculine lineage, is Magha. And tends to be a condemnation, a sort of repression that Magha does of things that are bad. It's essentially what's going on here. It sounds, it can sound however way you want it to. But we have to understand that each of these nakshatras has divinity within them and divine qualities within them. So to have Rahu in Magha signifies that there is a divine power that comes from denying and repressing and condemning things that are bad and don't work in life. It's a conservative and authoritative placement. People involved in ruling, managing, governing, and enforcing are very favored by a positive Magha. Now, what we read is that Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn are rather anti-authoritarian planets, grahas. Rahu and Ketu aren't really planets, but they are these important positions in an astrology chart. So Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn indicate pronounced clashes with conservative and hierarchical powers. So no matter how you dice it or slice it, Ketu or Rahu in Magha is a little bit difficult. It tends to bring to a head problems with authority. So the Ketu Dhanishta person is trying to find the beauty of the bhuta, of the objects inside them. And by doing that, at age 36, remember, you've been this Magha person this whole time through Ketu. And from age 0 to age 36, you're kind of in this feeling of, I am not good enough. I don't have objects within me. I've got a lot of self-criticism and self-doubt. And Rahu causes you to lead, rather than buffering yourself up, you're tending to condemn those who are using the wealth and objects that they've been given in the wrong way. So this is a person who can become famous and have renown, which they don't even like. They even don't like their own fame and renown that they get because of the Ketu. But they become well known for taking people down a peg. The Rahu in Magha really desires to have their own power. It's because the lack of beauty and resourcefulness and fame that they've experienced, the lack of feeling like they have intrinsic beauty qualities, Rahu in Magha causes them to want to leverage power in order to make up for that lack. It's a tough position, really. But the goodness that can come out of that, and there's always goodness that can come out of everything, the goodness that can come out of this position is a well-refined sense of somebody who, again, like we've already said with Ketu and Dhanishta, especially once you get to age 48, when your Ketu matures, you're going to realize that you appreciate and understand beauty, goodness that are inherent with all objects, especially if you've got a good Ketu position and if you've got a good Mars. Mars really helps with Ketu. Now, Saturn really helps with Rahu. So having a good Saturn means that you can wield your Magha power deputed from higher powers. You have a desire to take it, and you'll probably use it to be anti-authoritarian. Rahu in Magha is a very anti-authoritarian person, and this is a person who can do it by getting something from nothing, who is a person who's a master of the masses, who can use resources, as we know Dhanishta does. With Ketu and Dhanishta, you're a person who can be uprooted and changeable, getting the right networks together to call on the right people, to point the finger at a person who's in power, and get all the megaphones and all the cameras and all the people and all the writers and all the journalists all pointing their finger at that person who's in power and saying that person should not be in power. This is a person who can bring down and speak to government corruption and corporate corruption, bureaucratic corruption. And it's partly in order for them, in a positive way, to make the lesser of the evils by taking power and trying to use it in constructive rather than destructive ways. Rahu and Magha tends to operate this way, and they can be anti-authoritarian through developing their own authoritarian power to cut down authority. It's a tough place for Rahu to be, and this is a tough place for Ketu to be. But again, the goodness that can be found in that is that this is a person who appreciates wealth, understands it very deeply, will always have a feeling like, I'm nothing special. I don't have the inherent beauty of celebrities, and celebrities are all bullshit anyway. We're all celebrating the objects of beauty, and the people themselves are just carriages of that, and it's a whole ego trip. This is a person become very mature, very refined in their understanding of these things, and can still become famous overall. Having Ketu can get you famous through Dhanishta by doing something important in the world. So consider if you want to be a politician, if you want to be somebody who does good, positive change in the world and uses way lines of power that you've been given, mixed with your ability to understand how reputation works, creating a song, using artists at your disposal in order to make positive political and worldwide changes, leadership changes, can be a very powerful thing for all these things. But it won't come without some self-doubt and some dry, abrasive energy somewhere along the line. But that abrasion is a part of the karma of this person, and it's what develops the character of somebody who has a very strong sense of the true beauty of objects and the true beauty of using power aligned from above in lineage and deputed power. It's very interesting, very powerful combination. And look to using Mars to have inner strength and Saturn to have the ability to endure difficulties in order to get through this nakshatra, as well as to invoke the Nakshatra Sutra to see that you have inherent beauteous qualities. Everybody has inherent beauty inside them. And you can find that if you are patient and you look within yourself, especially practicing self-realization. You will find what you need and the resources around you to do what you have to do and become the powerful person that you are allowed to be in order to make the changes that the world needs through you as an instrument. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that. It's tough holding all this data in your brain. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the next thing for us to do is to describe what it's like when you have Rahu inside the sign of Dhanishta. Now, we've already described quite a little bit about the nature overall of Dhanishta, having the nodes here. What we've read is that Rahu is given by Vic Dicara as a maybe, a potential positive instrument for fame. Now, what we've read is that planets that are connected with prosperity and wealth tend to bring out the positive side of Dhanishta. Really, with Rahu here, it's mainly prosperity, wealth, and a little bit of fame that seem to be the main indications for Rahu's positivity inside of the sign. So, Rahu here, especially once you attain age 36, is going to start to bring out the desire to use Dhanishta's qualities in a way that allows you to understand the positive things that you've been given inside your soul, the positive things that your parents, your ancestry, and your culture have given you. Remember, the life lesson we learn from Dhanishta is that everybody has bhuta, which is a beautiful objects, because earth, vasu, means of all objects. So we all are of the earth, and we all shine like a diamond. Sometimes there's a little bit of dirt on the diamond, and we just need to rub it off and show everybody these are the good qualities inside of anything. That's all. We all have that capacity. If you feel like you are less than somebody else, or you've been given less soul qualities in order to make the diamond of your life shine, it's probably a head trip. And that's something that Rahu and Ketu, Dhanishta, needs to recognize and to understand. So Rahu Dhanishta is somebody who is moving through this consciousness. Now, how you get to this point where you can start really, Rahu and Dhanishta can become a wealthy person. And what you'll probably do as Rahu Dhanishta is go too far with Dhanishta. You will probably go into the deep end, as Rahu always does, and you'll find you'll become obsessed with the material egoic idea of shining like a diamond, of being somebody who is reputable, respected, loved, beautiful, famous, and wealthy and prosperous. You'll be obsessed with, again, wealth, prosperity, all this stuff are instruments of the soul. Every spirit, svaha, every soul, bhuva, wants to use the material world, bhur. They want to use the material world as an instrument for the conveyance of the desires inside of their soul. And if you get stuck on the instrument, imagine like you have a favorite saxophone that is absolutely mangled on the inside. It's gummed up, it's rusted out, it's beyond repair, and it doesn't actually make a good sound. It doesn't make a good pitch. It's got a terrible sound that everybody hates. But you say, this is this special material object. It's got good qualities, and I'm obsessed with it. I want it to be, let's say it's like made out of gold. This is probably a good example of Dhanishta, Rahu and Dhanishta. They get a golden saxophone. It's heavy, so it hurts your spine to hold it. It doesn't make a good sound because gold is not conducive to the pipe-like quality that is supposed to be expected from a saxophone. The whole thing is made gold on the inside out, and it's not practical. It doesn't make a good sound. Everybody hates the sound of it, and it even looks like you're kind of an asshole playing this golden saxophone. But you're obsessed with the fact that it's gold. This is the only saxophone I'm going to use. It's like, why are you so obsessed with the gold-plated thing that's ultimately actually not conducive to any kind of goodness? This is Rahu and Dhanishta. This is getting a big house, big fancy car, going on helicopter rides, hanging out with famous people who are actually pieces of crap, who do drugs maybe even, or a lot of drugs in a way that they become bad character quality of people, getting associated with groups that are powerful, even might have some kind of power that goes against the government. That's especially with Ketu and Magha, as we're going to talk about. But this Rahu and Dhanishta person is aligning themselves with powerful or seductive people, depending on whether Ketu is in Ashlesha or Magha. Either way, it's obsolescent. It's not actually good, useful things and people, resources that you're tapping into. You're doing it just for the sake of the bigness. And life is with Rahu and Dhanishta, you're gonna get tired of it. You're gonna get tired of the glamour. You're gonna get tired of the wham bam, thank you ma'am. You're gonna get tired of the shimmer and the shine. Don't sell the steak, sell the sizzle. The sizzle on the camera, the way the camera hits the steak. You're not going to care about all that. You're just going to want to care about the taste of the steak. You're going to care about the life you're actually living and how your resources, your fame, and the beautiful objects of your family, your body, your beauty, all these resources are instruments for deeper spiritual and soul desires. And when you get into spirituality, you actually find that the easier something comes, the less surrender you can really cultivate. I know that sounds strange, but really consider it. You don't appreciate money when you have it falling out of your pockets. You don't appreciate fame when you have it falling out of your pockets, especially. Fame's a good one. A lot of people are famous and they say, get the camera off me for the love of God. I want to just sit down and eat with my family in peace without the paparazzi coming and snapping pictures at me. Rahu and Dhanishta is the kind of person who would bite off way more than they intended to chew in these regards. and it becomes salty, it becomes cheap, it becomes tinny for them, and they don't want to have any of the wealth at some point. But now they're in it, they have it, and if they're intelligent, if they got a good Saturn, they'll learn to make the best out of it. And they'll learn to use whatever they've garnered in the world of fame, wealth, power, in order to ameliorate whatever deeper soul desires they have. In the case of a Shlesha, if you have Ketu in a Shlesha tends to feel like they're not beautiful. Again, it's the same sort of similar story to Dhanishta. They feel like there's no intrinsic loving, delicious quality to them. People aren't enticed by the Ketu, and a Shlesha person feels that they're not enticing. They lack the deep, delicious serpentine embrace that a Shlesha wants. Dhanishta will bring them the instruments and opulence is the word I was looking for, which would bring people to them. But then the serpentine embrace that they have with people is cheap. It's an illusion. People don't actually love you for who you are. They love you for the money that you've garnered through your Rahu hunger for fame and opulence. So then the Ashlesha Ketu person feels cheap because it's not me that the people love, it's the objects that I've gained. And through that, the Ketu and Ashlesha person begins to love who they actually are. Now in terms of Ketu and Magha, it's more about power. So what kind of power do I have? And the Dhanishta, Rahu, sorry if I got to say this in case I said that wrong. I meant to say Ketu and Magha. I think I said Dhanishta. When you have Ketu in Magha, you have Rahu and Dhanishta. The stuff that you garner through the Rahu, Dhanishta, the wealth, the opulence, the power, the way lines, the networking connections, this allows you to enjoy power. But the power means nothing if there's no concise reason, some true depth to it, some true meaning to it. And the power that you garner should help to develop, really, with Pitrinam, it's like developing family lines. Shoot, I just missed poor Natalie had a comment for me. I'm going to bring my YouTube viewer back and hopefully her comment is still there. I think it might not be. Ketu and Magha ultimately seeks to redefine, reformulate authority power lines in a way that is constructive. Natalie, I got your message and I'm going to read it on my phone, but I just want to finish what I'm saying here first. This is the Ketu Magha person's ultimate desire, is to bring together the true meaning and purpose of power, especially power from family lines, power from government. Hey, Lucas, nice to see you. Power. This is the nature of the power of Magha, is it strongly desires the way lines of power to be meaningful. And so this can be an anti-authoritarian person. Rahu and Ketu in Magha can tend to be tough. This is the better of the four possibilities. When you have Ketu in Magha and Rahu and Dhanishta, at least with Rahu and Dhanishta, you get some power, especially up to age 36. You're, feeling like I haven't been given enough power. I'm not attached to some family line. This is going to be someone who lives in like Russia and sees the Russian family has all this power and old bloated, way lines of power. And I myself, my family, there's lots of places. I shouldn't say, just any particular place. I know Russia has run into that kind of thing in history, but there's plenty of things that have run into that. The British monarchies of history, the wealth and opulence of the rich masses. If your family's not a part of that, then this Magha, Ketu, either finds that their family does come from that line of power, and they want to be anti-authoritarian. They want to break it down. They want to use their power and the opulence of Dhanishta to point the finger back and say, bite the hand that feeds them, but for the sake of a spiritual intent. They know that it's bullshit. They know that the power lines of my family that I've come from has taken advantage of people. It's capitalistic. It's using the rich class in order to squash the poorer class, and I see it and I want it to stop. Or it's the other way. Magha Ketu person might have come from no family power or somewhere in the middle, but either way, they can see how absolute power corrupts absolutely. And they want to fix it. So they'll use the Rahu Dhanishta to get way lines of power in order to point that finger back at gross government corruption and opulence. The problem is with Rahu and Dhanishta, you're probably going to use way lines of power to gain power to point that finger back, but you're going to find that whatever wealth you garner, reputation, power you garner through Rahu and Dhanishta is going to be through a medium that is power, opulence, reputation, celebrity. You know, you can't become a celebrity through celebrityism and then say celebrities are a bad thing, because then you'll lose your power. So the Rahu and Dhanishta person begins to learn what it means to conduct in a fair way. You go into the system of power in order to erode it, to properly, consciously stay powerful, stay wealthy, stay in the position of the limelight without being cheap about it, without just getting infamous by doing something silly like that. And then you learn truly what wealth means. You begin to come back to the Magha personality, who essentially wants to use the Ketu and Magha, wants to use its influence to provide positive power towards things that are actually meaningful in society. So it's much more of a power political thing with Magha with Ketu and Magha than it is with Ketu and Ashlesha. Ketu and Ashlesha, it's more about my personal soul experience of being seductive, of being powerful. You know, it's more of a personal experience with Ketu Ashlesha, whereas it's more of a political experience with Ketu in Magha when you have Rahu and Dhanishta. Right? I hope that's clear. Either way, whether it's Rahu or Ketu and Dhanishta, it's important to remember that these are just instruments. The wealth, the items, the opulence that we gain through Dhanishta is an instrument of our soul desires. For good planets aligned here, Moon, Venus, Jupiter, Mercury, this tends to be the fact that simply the part of the opulence is part of my soul desire, which is not necessarily a bad thing or an evil thing intrinsically. It's just part of some people's desire structure and nature. And we can see through the lessons of the nakshatras that the material world is not necessarily an evil thing. It's all about the intent moving through it. Right? Now, Natalie, you are sending me some cool comments here. Oh, it's okay. I can see you can say sorry for chatting so much. That's okay. I'm enjoying you chatting. And this is what I often do on my channel. I have it live so people can join in and mention what they're feeling. Great conjunction with Pluto, Saturn, Ketu, close to Dhanishta, and an overturning of power and values. That's very interesting. I wonder where the Rahu would have been at that point. But yeah, Dhanishta can really be this signifier of overturning and changing of values, especially when it comes to opulent classes and these kinds of things. But I digress. I hope that everybody's enjoyed that. This has been our Dhanishta reading. Now we have one more reading to go, everybody. So that is the end of the Rahu and Ketu section of our reading. And thank you very much for everybody who's been watching. If you're enjoying the work that I do, you can check me out. Join my email list by going to dustincormier.com/subscribe. And if you're interested in getting a reading with me, you can contact me at astrology@dustincormier.com. Or you can go to my website, dustincormier.com, and check out the astrology section, you'll find there that I'll tell you all about what it would mean to have a reading with me. If you have any particular questions as related to this, we can talk about it. But usually I go through the whole chart, and I'm happy to do that with anybody who's interested. So thank you very much for watching, folks. And I highly recommend you check out my email list, because I'm going to have my own astrology works, my own poetry works, my own writings are going to be coming through that email list pretty soon. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Now we have one more reading for today. This is still discussing Dhanishta, and this is going to come from the divine forces of the lunar nakshatras as portrayed in the Vedas. Oh, that's awesome, Natalie. I'm glad you enjoyed the Leo video. That must be the Leo rising video that I've done. So, 245. Now, this reading is going to come from an author who is known... This author is known for being a sidereal author. That doesn't mean that her work is not very valuable. This author has done a lot of great research into the character of the deities that rule each nakshatra as they are conveyed in the Vedas. So she's a wonderful author, very well researched. Her name is Radhe, R-A-D-H-E. And I very much greatly admire her work. So when I read from her work, I often will just keep in mind and say when I think that, you'll see what I mean when we get into it. There's lots of mentions, for example, of like if a person has, because she's a sidereal astrologer, her interpretation is that Dhanishta is at the end of Capricorn. So you can have Mars falling into the end of Capricorn, exalted. And especially if Mars is exalted in Capricorn, according to your rising sign, if it's at an angle, it'll bring out some incredible strength, because then you'll have Mars exalted in an angle. That's called a Mahapurusha Yoga. But in today's time, Dhanishta only falls in Aquarius. It's not in Capricorn at all, in tropical zodiac. So that's why this author can have some things sometimes that I'll speak to as we go along. So keep it in mind as we read through. For now, what we're reading here is a description of the Dhanishta Nakshatra, native. So, of course, we're going to read, the same thing we've been reading throughout this whole thing. A consistent theme of Dhanishta. Remember, it's in the name. Dhana means wealth, and Ishta means things that people enjoy, things that people love. It's an emphasis. So, a consistent theme of Dhanishta is its ability to bring fame and prosperity to the native. I'm just going to quickly read what my friend Lucas has said. Sorry if I've covered this. Is Dhanishta unfavorable to marriage? Not necessarily. Especially the moon in Dhanishta is regarded as good. So the moon in Dhanishta would probably have the opulence, the resources, depending on how the moon is doing. The moon is obviously in Saturn's sign here, which is not exactly the moon's favorite position, but it's technically neutral to Saturn, or Saturn is neutral to the moon. So it's a neutral position by sign in the tropical zodiac in today's time. And it's a positive nakshatra. So I would say Dhanishta moon is not a bad place for marriage. I wouldn't say it's unfavorable. I'd say, if anything, the moon in Dhanishta allows you to experience, especially if the moon has positive aspects from its friends, it has the ability really to understand beauty, opulence, money, and to bring the kind of resources that would make this person valuable and feel valuable in a marriage, and to a family, and to a marriage partner's family, right? If you go out with a person and you're doing well, if you come from wealth, or if you just have wealth, if you can display your knowledge and intelligence and beauty and radiance and wealth, your partner's parents are going to see that you're a gleaming little diamond. So I would say Dhanishta, for these reasons, is positive favorable to marriage, at least by the moon in this nakshatra strictly. But you have to look at, is the moon in any bad avashtas? Is it got bad shadbala? Is there any other reason why is it very dark? Is there any other reason why the moon wouldn't shine, right? So ultimately, when it comes to the Dhanishta native, and this is worth mentioning too, that when we say a Dhanishta native, first of all, we mean someone with the moon in this nakshatra of Dhanishta. Second of all, someone with the lagna, the rising sign cusp, falling into Dhanishta. And then third of all is somebody who has just many planets. It could be the Ratmakaraka falling there. It could be the Rahu or Ketu lord falling there. It could just be a stellium there, all squished into the same sign of Dhanishta. Any of these people would have the quality of a Dhanishta native. And the consistent theme of Dhanishta, Dhana meaning wealth, Ishta meaning very or loved. A consistent theme of Dhanishta native is its ability to bring fame and prosperity to the native. It is one of a handful of nakshatras which, under proper chart conditions, are renowned for material wealth. The other nakshatras that are known for wealth include Rohini, which is ruled by Prajapati, Uttara Falguni, which is ruled by the god Bhagha of wealth and prosperity, and Magha, who is ruled by the Pitris. Magha tends to be more about being attached to lines of family-given power, for better and for worse. But obviously, if the moon's well placed, then this could be a positive family power. The family has nurtured its family line of power. So the moon in Magha can bring this kind of opulence as well. And there are several others, but these are the big ones, the big hitters. Now, this should be of little surprise, as Dhanishta translates as wealthy, and its symbol is a diamond. Critically, the ruling devatas of Dhanishta are category gods associated with the material realm. That's the Vasus that I was talking about, with Bur, right? There's Bur, Bhuva, and Svaha. There's the material realm, there's the sort of emotional mental realm, and then there's the spiritual realm. Om combines them all as one. Ah from the back of the throat, U in the midst of the throat, and then M at the lips. So Aum is all three realms conceived as one, which is an important thing to regard. But they are one within their individuality. So the material realm has its own beauty, it's its own agent in the divine cosmology of divine consciousness. So the ruling devatas, the deity of Dhanishta is Vasunam, which is the material realm. The earth is the domain and their sphere of action. So look to the nature and placement of the Dhanishta planet to determine the type of wealth that this nakshatra is going to bring to the person. Now, this is where our author gives us some examples of how this can kind of happen. Now, depending on the planet and how it kind of goes, in today's time, so she gives several examples, sadly. I would almost want to describe them, but it's not worth it. But she's an author who regards the end of Capricorn as contained by Dhanishta. So she says if Mars is exalted at the end of Capricorn, it would be in Dhanishta. But in today's time, remember, Dhanishta begins at about 10 degrees of Aquarius or 17 degrees of Aquarius, depending on if you're following Vic Dicara or Ernst Wilhelm. So all of Dhanishta is pretty much contained in Aquarius, which means the only planet that could really be doing spanking well is Venus or Saturn, of course. Although Saturn is not regarded as a great planet to fall into Dhanishta, as we've already described, because Dhanishta is about material opulence and Saturn doesn't care for that, which is a beautiful aspect about Saturn. But a good Saturn, let's say Saturn is in Dhanishta, in Aquarius, in the 7th house, and you're a Leo rising, let's say. Saturn has yoga power in the 7th house. It's in its own sign of Aquarius, and it's in Dhanishta. That Saturn, depending on what Saturn rules in the chart, in this case it would be the 6th and 7th house, those things would bring opulence and material wealth based on those things. The Dhanishta Saturn in this case would have material things that allow it to ameliorate debt. It has things set up to consistently bring in probably residual income through that 6th house, as well as good business contacts through the 7th house. And these would be the forms of opulence and wealth that Saturn would gain, particularly through Saturn, through being loyal to those connections and constantly working on them in a 6th house way. That's an example of this opulence and wealth. I have things that support me consistently and in a routine way, working on my business contacts that allow me to sow seeds of positive business potential. That would be, again, Leo rising, Saturn in Dhanishta, in Aquarius, in the 7th house. That would especially be good because Saturn is in its own sign and it's in an angle. So that's called a Mahapurusha. Now, Venus also would do well in Dhanishta. Venus is delighted by Saturn. So especially we could imagine like a Scorpio rising. Venus likes to be close to the 4th house. That's where it gains its yoga power. So imagine Scorpio rising, and Venus is in Dhanishta at about like 18 degrees of Aquarius, let's say. Venus for Scorpio rules the 12th house of Libra and the 7th house of Taurus. So this would be a Venus who finds great, delicious surrender through the 12th house with its partner and with its partners in business, but especially its marriage partner through the 7th house. It would get great karma, great enjoyment out of serving and surrendering and enjoying being with their partner, especially because it's in the 4th house, the private zone of its material life. So it would build a happy home through the love of its partner, in partnership with its partner. And that home with that Venus in the 4th house would be illustrious. It would be opulent. It would have lots of beauty. And not only, really, what would be more important, it wouldn't just be like, artifacts that no one can touch. This would have a hot tub. This would have a pool table. This would have arts and crafts stuff. It would have a hiking path that the lover and their partner would love. They love going for a walk down the beach path from their house, and that's right close to their home that they can do at any time. It would be because of the 7th house and 12th house rulership of Venus for Scorpio rising. That would be their material opulence. They would do things that they would get a wealth at home, 4th house, that they get to enjoy with their partner and even serve their partner through. So this is an example of how this stuff can work out. What does it mean to have that opulence, specifically for the planet that is inside of the nakshatra? So now, when describing the characteristics of the native, of the Dhanishta native, Jyotisha Shastra mentions other attributes beyond material wealth and notoriety. For example, ancient Shastra states that the Dhanishta native is generous, and remember, the native is someone with the moon here, the rising sign here, or a stellium here, or a very important planet. Shastra states that this native of Dhanishta is generous, splendorous, heroic, and charitable. So, thus, although the native is naturally inclined towards wealth and recognition, this person is likewise renowned for their compassionate and philanthropic nature. So, in generally speaking, Dhanishta is one of these nice nakshatras. A person with the moon there, they tend to be philanthropic. They want to do good things for the world. They want to do good things for people. And they're compassionate in this way. This is the nature of the material world where we are all one. This is the type of person, especially if things are lined up in the right way, where they can experience that we're all one community. And when I give of my wealth, my things that I have, I share my toys, I gain the splendor of a humanitarian compassion where everybody respects and loves me and gives me that sort of sharing as well. When I share my toys, other people share their toys with me. So this could be a person who ends up like living at a cottage and they have a ski-doo because their neighbors come over anytime. My wine is in the fridge. You know, have yourself a little glass and then like go for a rip on the sea-doo. You know, you can go on the water and you can go on the sea-doo anytime my house is open to you. Just let me know. Maybe call ahead in advance. But if I'm not there, come and use my stuff. And then so they find that they go and visit their buddy's house. And they're like, hey, man, do you want to go a rip on the snow machine? The snow ripper? What am I thinking of? Snow ski machine. Whatever it's called. You know, there's a word for it. It's when you're up north at a cottage. It's like a sea-doo, but it's for the snow. And you get to snow ski on this machine. And because they shared their summer toys with the person on the lake, now they go out to their buddy's place in the winter. And their buddy's like, take all my stuff and just use it. Share it. You share your toys, I share my toys. And then that way the Dhanishta person has wealth. Opulence. Snowmobile. Thank you, Natalie. God bless you for paying attention. Why couldn't I think of that? You get to share your sea-doo in the summer, and your friends share their snowmobile with you in the winter. That's Dhanishta. That's having the wealth, right? Especially because when you're not using your toys, you might as well let somebody else use it. So this generous humanitarian energy is part of the magic of Dhanishta. So we have an example here. A good illustration of Dhanishta native is Barack Obama. And they have Capricorn. Okay, so they have Dhanishta. According to this author, Barack Obama has Dhanishta rising. So the rising sign point falls in Dhanishta. Successful as well as famous. Obama is the first African-American U.S. president. His Dhanishta Lagna, his Dhanishta rising sign, is well supported by the placement of the lord of his rising sign, which is Saturn, and Jupiter in the victory nakshatra of Uttara Ashada. That's cool. So we have, in the case of Obama, he's probably a Aquarius rising. Saturn, which rules his rising sign is in Dhanishta, and Saturn, which rules his rising sign, falls in Uttara Ashada, which is this sign of glory, of triumph, and it would do well even in tropical Vedic astrology because it's Uttara Ashada falls mostly into Capricorn, which is Saturn's own sign. So this is an example of how this can kind of flow. Now, the last thing to say, well, not the last thing, but let's note that if Dhanishta Nakshatra is greatly afflicted, or if it's occupied by materialist Rahu, now this author has a slightly different take on Rahu falling into Dhanishta. Materialist Rahu will cause the Dhanishta person to give an overemphasis on wealth. Not just Rahu, but any great affliction occurring in Dhanishta. This person gets an overemphasis on wealth and a need for recognition. In similar fashion, the inherent generosity of Dhanishta may give way to stinginess and hoarding. So, where Dhanishta wants to be, wealth, sex, money is like it's like blood. If you squeeze your blood, it's not going to flow. You want to keep it like an open hand. It's the open hand that allows money, sex, happiness, joy, communication with others to flow uninhibited. So you got to allow money to flow out in order for money to flow in. You got to allow love to flow out in order for it to flow in. When somebody has Rahu, Ketu, possibly Saturn, Mars, or the sun would signify this because the sun is not happy. At least in today's time, the sun would be in Aquarius, and the sun has Saturn for an enemy. So the sun in Dhanishta might indicate somebody who can be a bit stingy as well, who can have this hoarding. Although they might go back and forth on it. They might have been taught in their lives to hoard money and to hoard their wealth. It all depends on how their karma goes. So this is what can kind of happen when there's afflictions in Dhanishta. Now, the tabur, which is a little drum. Okay, let me answer Ladio here. Wonder how it affects if it's in the 8th house, if it's about material gains. So it depends on what's falling in that 8th house. If you've got Aquarius in the 8th house, that probably means that you are... You're probably Cancer rising or something close to there. So whatever's falling in your 8th house of Aquarius, if it's the moon, then you've got your whole personality is wrapped up in that 8th house center. And it would, the 8th house, whatever's going on in Dhanishta in your 8th house is probably going to relate to that sort of entrepreneurial, plucky, kind of faithful, ballsy, investing a bunch of money and effort with other people. And it can make for great material gains, actually, especially if the planet's well placed. Venus in that position can make for some powerful monetary decisions. Saturn in that position, because it's in its own sign of Aquarius, can be a mix, because we've already heard that Saturn's not too happy in the sign of Dhanishta. But overall, whatever's going on in Dhanishta, this, if you've got Jupiter there, if you got Mercury there, these planets will probably hit a drum, bang a drum that can bring risky opportunities that can bring material wealth, especially if those planets are well placed and well supported in the astrology chart. A well supported planet in the sign of Dhanishta in the 8th house will have great ups and downs. The key is when you have, cook whatever, risky, interesting 8th house groups. This would be like somebody who takes their money and, does like a timeshare with a cabin in Aspen. You do a timeshare, you own it with 10 other people, and you get to go and experience the skiing. Or, this would also be somebody who owns a cabin in Aspen, builds it with some friends, you all pitch in money, and then you do the timeshare so other people pay you money every year. This is somebody who can own something and own a building like that. This is somebody who can go to Peru or Costa Rica, pitch in on $100,000 plot of land with 10 people, $10,000 each. You've all pitched in for it, but now you develop a yoga center there, and now that yoga center brings in lots of people with lots of money, and that is a positive indication for planets that are well placed in Dhanishta in the 8th house. Cool. Which medical field is suitable for Dhanishta? Is it heretic? Is it hectic to establish? So you got Rahu in Libra, Saturn in Cancer, Venus in Pisces. Well, for a Dhanishta native, it's hard to say whether it'd be hectic to establish a medical field. Can't say it's not doable. I mean, Dhanishta, really, its bread is buttered not necessarily on the side of the medical field, unless you find some ingenious, intuitive, tangible good. If you're a good medical researcher and you find some kind of brilliant idea that can make money, that can perhaps help a lot of people, and also can generate positive wealth in the process, almost as a leaning towards good humanitarian instincts to share your knowledge, that would be a way where Dhanishta would really rub off on your position in the medical field. Depending on what planets you have in Dhanishta, it's going to operate in different ways, right? Ultimately, Dhanishta, its bread is buttered on the side of understanding how the material world, science, research, money, opulence, fame, can be used as an instrument for your soul's desires. That's really what it's all about. So in the medical field, if you want to be a medical person who makes advances in the medical field, or who loves your work as a medical person, the money that you get will allow you to do your medical work in a way that helps the world that you enjoy doing. And you'll get that money in order to do that. And whatever you do might also increase your wealth, if Dhanishta is well placed. Remember, Dhanishta isn't always well placed. If you got planets there that are afflicted, you'll feel like I don't have enough money to do what I want to do. So keep that in mind. Now, final thing we'll say today is that the tabor, or the drum, is a symbol for Dhanishta. It's this tiny little drum. We've already shown a picture of it at some point, but I'll do it now for the sake of illustration. The tabor, these are more like tablas. The tabor is more like this guy here. It's the two-sided drum. There's also the drum that this lady hits with sticks. I'm actually not sure which one is the tabor, but these are all drums that resonate with the themes and symbols of Dhanishta as the timekeeper. So Dhanishta can suggest musical inclinations for the native, whether it's singing, songwriting, or playing musical instruments. Wolfgang Mozart, famed for his classical music masterpieces, has, according to this author, Mozart has 3 planets in Dhanishta, including the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn. Very interesting. It's interesting that the Sun, Mercury, and Saturn would all be together in the sign of Dhanishta. That would probably signify that Mercury is probably combust and probably getting squashed by the Sun and Saturn there. Very interesting. So I could see there being troubles there, but also goodness there. It's interesting because it's the Sun and Saturn. However you dice it or slice it, that's Mozart. We know he was good with music. And he does have those 3 planets there, again, according to this author. It's interesting to think about. But I digress. These days it's hard to pinpoint exactly where these nakshatras fall in a tropical Vedic consideration as a tropical Vedic astrologer. Again, for those watching, because I know I'm probably going to make this part of the video a separate video, how to know whether you've got Dhanishta planets. According to Vic Dicara, it's between 17.5 degrees of Aquarius and 0 degrees, 0.5 degrees of Pisces. For Ernst Wilhelm, it's between 9.5 degrees of Aquarius and 23 degrees of Aquarius. So if you've got planets between 17.5 and 23 degrees, it's for sure Dhanishta. So keep that in mind. Like I said, if you guys have enjoyed this, feel free to email me at astrology@dustincormier.com, or feel free to go to my website, where you can go to my astrology section, and then there you can see what I offer as an astrologer. Doing this kind of work, you can email me, ask me any questions that you want, and we'll be able to discuss whether you would want to do something. Whether we'd want to have a session discussing whatever you want to discuss, etc. As well, I highly recommend everybody check out dustincormier.com/subscribe. And I'm going to have a link for that in the description. So you can check out my email list, join my email list, and see when I've got new videos, and more importantly, books. I'm writing some books right now. Some of it's poetry, but I'm also going to be producing my own tropical Vedic astrology introduction book soon. So if you want to join my email list, that way you can stay in touch with what I've got coming in the world of Dustin Cormier and How to Rock Astrology. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been a slice. Thank you very much for everyone who's been hanging out. We've had Ladiosa Colta. We've had our friend GX96. Oh, sweet. And it looks like Monica has given... Am I right on that? Let's see. Oh, how sweet. Thank you, Monica, my dear. My friend Monica is always supporting my channel. And she's even got this sweet little... wonder if you'll be able to see it. The sweet little pair, guys. Just like, how's it going? It's sweet that YouTube allows you to do these things. Thank you, Monica. And thank you, everybody, for watching. We've had our friend GXY, and Lucas was here. As well, the True Blue Natalie was hanging out with us quite a bit today as well. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you to everybody, and we'll see you guys on the other side. Check out this video. It's going to have all the timestamps there for you guys. And keep your eyes peeled for more stuff coming out in the world of Dustin Cormier. If you guys have enjoyed this, keep your eyes peeled for Saturday. We're going to be doing more this coming Saturday, November 29th. We're going to do a live stream. We're going to be doing free chart readings discussing your Tropical Vedic Big 3. It's a new thing that I've been doing. So keep your eyes peeled till then. And thank you very much for hanging out, everybody. See you guys on the flip side.